The calm before the storm. The morning sun crept over the jagged skyline of New York City, casting golden light over the buildings like nothing had changed. Taxis honked, steam hissed from underground vents, and pedestrians flowed like blood through the city's arteries. It was by all accounts a normal day, except it wasn't. Mark Thompson, a veteran air traffic controller at JFK, sipped burnt coffee from a mug that read, "I control the sky." His fingers danced across the console in front of him, monitoring flights cruising smoothly above the eastern seaboard until they weren't. "What the hell?" he muttered. Blips began vanishing, 1, 2, then a dozen aircraft gone in under a minute. Not crashing, not diverting, gone. His heart raced as he tapped the screen, then rebooted the system. No response. He reached for the emergency line, but before his hand hit the receiver, the air around the control tower vibrated with a low, deep hum, like 1,000 bass notes played beneath the world itself. Then the sky peeled open. Above Manhattan, the clouds shimmered as if sliced by an invisible blade. Something massive, teardrop-shaped in silver, emerged from the thin blue air, impossibly silent, impossibly large. It simply appeared like reality had forgotten to load a part of itself until now. Gasps and screams erupted across Times Square. Phones were raised, cars slammed brakes. A collective breath was held. And then nothing happened. No explosions, no declarations, no beams of light vaporizing city blocks. Just a strange, unnatural calm. Mark stared out the window. His panic, once a wildfire, began cooling in his veins. That was strange, wasn't it? He should have been terrified, but now it was like he had been sedated. "They're just ships," he whispered. "Big ones, sure, but maybe they're peaceful." In Tokyo, in London, in Rio, and Johannesburg, the same ship appeared at the same time, hovering over population centers, like gods descending from the sky. And humanity just accepted it. In a covert orbital station parked behind Jupiter's shadow, the watchers observed in satisfied silence. They were ancient, clinical, and confident. They had studied humans for over 300 Earth years, monitoring their wars, greed, irrational passion, and chaos. To the watchers, humanity was a project, a broken one, unstable, impulsive, and dangerous, but fixable. The suppression field is holding at optimal saturation, reported. Observer first class, Lyra, her fingers scrolling through neural data models. Aggression rates are dropping. Hostile thoughts are below measurable thresholds. The head watcher, a towering figure draped in biometallic robes, nodded with slow clinical approval. Phase 1 complete. They are docile, as predicted. The field wasn't designed to kill. The watchers considered themselves civilized, enlightened. Their technology wasn't meant to conquer through violence. It simply dulled emotion. Not all of it, just the inconvenient ones: fear, rage, rebellion, willpower. The perfect pacifier. And it worked. Across Earth, presidents, generals, and newscasters alike felt the same creeping fog descend over their thoughts. In the Situation Room in Washington, the U.S. president sat across from top military brass, their eyes slightly glassy, their words dragging like molasses. "They don't seem hostile," murmured the Secretary of Defense, his voice unusually tranquil. "Perhaps we should welcome them." No one argued, no one shouted, just slow nods and passive agreement. But not everyone was caught in the haze. In a concrete lab buried beneath a university in Boulder, Colorado, Professor Helen Ward frowned at the violent spikes dancing across her instrument panel. A soft migraine bloomed behind her eyes as she stared at the numbers. Massive radiation across all EM bands. "That's not natural," she whispered. She pulled off her headset. The deeper underground she went, the more her head cleared. Her thoughts sharpened. Her chest burned with a sensation she hadn't felt since her early days as a climate protester in DC. Anger. Pure righteous anger. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. The suppression field had one critical flaw, one that the watchers, for all their intellect, had missed. It didn't penetrate rock. Not well anyway. A few meters of concrete, steel, or dense geological strata, and the field's influence dropped off sharply. The further underground a human went, the more their mind returned to its natural state. The watchers had known this technically, but they had dismissed it as irrelevant. Why would a civilization go underground? One report had asked. Such behavior is instinctive in lesser species. Earth mammals, perhaps, not intelligent life. But humans build bunkers, subways, mining towns, fallout shelters, tunnels beneath cathedrals, whole cities beneath cities. By the end of that first day, thousands of people had slipped below the surface, and begun to remember, and to question, and to plan. In an abandoned subway tunnel beneath Brooklyn, James Walker, a former Army signals analyst, sat against the wall watching flickering emergency lights cast shadows against rusted metal. A half-dozen others, maintenance workers, a young EMT, a homeless man sat nearby, all wide-eyed and shaken. "Feels like coming out of a dream," someone muttered. Walker nodded slowly. "No, not a dream," he said, opening his old military laptop and unfolding a crude map of the subway system. "It was control, and we're going to take it back." Mines beneath the earth. The silence of the underground was different. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the absence of influence. Professor Helen Ward stood in the center of her lab's storage sublevel, surrounded by concrete reinforced steel and data streaming across half-broken monitors. The further she went underground, the more that hazy peace, the bizarre calmness everyone above ground felt, peeled away like a wet blanket. And in its place, fire. Not rage, not recklessness. Determination. Her fingers trembled as she typed. Her instruments were detecting layered waveforms like an orchestra of signals, all playing at slightly different frequencies, tuned precisely to suppress specific human neural pathways. It wasn't random, it wasn't accidental. It was scientific, intentional, weaponized. Helen paused and looked at her own reflection in the darkened screen. "They're not just watching us," she whispered. "They're rewriting us." Above her, the university halls were silent. Students wandered the campus in dazed contentment. Professors stopped asking questions. Even campus security now nodded politely to strange silver drones floating just overhead. No panic, no protest, no resistance. Hundreds of miles away in the underbelly of Manhattan's subway system, James Walker rolled out a tattered map across the floor of an abandoned maintenance office. The room smelled like rust oil and old sweat. "Grand Central's down," said Mike, the subway worker, who joined him after that first day. Everyone topside just keeps smiling, like someone dropped sedatives in the water. "Worse than sedatives," James replied. "It's engineered compliance." He circled 3 red X's on the map. Subway lines with reinforced foundations, deepest tunnels. If we can move along these corridors, we stay below the suppression threshold. That gives us time to think, to organize. A young woman, maybe early 20s, huddled nearby with a handheld radio. "Who the hell are you?" she asked James suspiciously. He looked up. "Walker, used to work DARPA adjacent, neural signal analysis. Last year we were tracking Earth's response to cosmic anomalies. Now I'm up to... I think we were preparing for this without even knowing it." Her voice dropped. "You think the government knew?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Whatever was happening, whatever they were under, it was planned. Whether humans were complicit or just pawns, that was a problem for another day. Right now, they had a war to survive. In the cloaked observation post orbiting Jupiter, the watchers were smug. "Our projections were accurate to within 0.7%, observer." Lyra noted, "Humanity is pacified. Urban aggression has fallen 93%. The head watcher clasped 4 clawed hands behind his back, studying the holographic feed of Earth's surface. Streets filled with smiling citizens, armed forces idle, world leaders nodding through meaningless press conferences. They had done it. They had domesticated an apex predator. "Begin phase 2, the head watcher ordered. Decommission their harmful technologies. Begin guided evolution." Robotic drone spheres of sleek alloy descended upon cities. They silently shut down weapons factories, research centers, even portions of the internet. Energy grids were subtly rerouted, satellites reprogrammed. It wasn't invasion by force, it was sterilization by consent. And it was working. Almost. Deep beneath Johannesburg, in a disused gold mining shaft now lit by strung-up camping lanterns, a second resistance cell was waking up. Similar stories were playing out beneath salt mines in Poland, subway lines in Tokyo, and a Cold War bunker outside Montreal. Wherever Earth was thick enough, old enough, or forgotten enough, humanity was starting to shake off the haze. In Boulder, Helen Ward initiated the first mass transmission of her findings sent via analog lines and shortwave frequencies. Her message was simple: stay underground. Suppression field weakens below 40 meters. They are not here to help. We are under control, but not lost. Resist, adapt, reclaim. James Walker was one of the first to receive it. He stared at the transmission in silence. "She's right," he said to his group. "This isn't invasion, it's assimilation. We don't need guns, we need frequency counters, RF filters, Jammers. He slammed his hand on the table. We're not at war yet, but we're damn close. 2 days later, the watchers noticed the first anomaly. Observer, a technician, reported from the control node. Neural compliance spike dropped by 1.4% in North America. Glitch, Lyra replied flatly. Statistical noise. But that glitch repeated in Australia, then France, then Chile. In each case, the suppression field's metrics dipped, then rebounded. But they never rebounded all the way. Begin recalibration, the headwatcher ordered. But recalibration couldn't reach beneath 100 feet of rock. James and Helen finally spoke over a secured analog line running through a buried telecommunications conduit. She was exhausted, he was hoarse, but both were fully awake. They're not gods, Helen said. They're just old, arrogant, lazy. They think we're going to roll over. They think wrong. She sent him schematics, rough designs for a signal cancellation rig, something that could scramble the suppression field locally. James stared at the mess of hand-drawn notes and scanned documents. It's ugly, he admitted. It doesn't have to be pretty, she replied. It has to work. 3 nights later, in a dusty tunnel, 80 feet beneath lower Manhattan, the first test began. They hooked old radio's copper coils, signal repeaters, and portable batteries into a Frankenstein machine. James flipped the switch. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, a wave hit them, like slamming into cold air after suffocating in heat. Mike stumbled back, hands trembling. I feel angry, he said. Really angry. James smiled for the first time in weeks. Good, we need that. They were finally themselves again. And sooner or later, they would help the world be the same. The resistance awakens. The storm didn't start with thunder. It started in whispers passed through cracked radios, whispered in subway tunnels, scribbled on bunker walls. Stay underground, find copper wiring, don't trust the calm, build the blocker. Across 5 continents, in forgotten corners of Earth, resistance cells were forming. Not with banners or rifles, but with tools, cables, and fury. The world above still smiled, watched by ships that hovered like silent sentinels. Below, the real war had already begun. In a salt mine near Krakow, Poland, Tomasz Nowak stared at a map scrawled with grease pencil. The air smelled of rock dust and diesel. He hadn't spoken to his brother in days, his brother, who now wandered Krakow's streets, smiling like everything was fine. Tomasz had seen footage of his blank eyes. It was like someone had hollowed out his soul. We'll bring them back, whispered Zofia, an old geology professor turned rebel engineer. But not with weapons, with frequencies. They activated their first crude field scrambler, an old mining generator hooked to radio coils and quartz tubing. Tomasz didn't know if it would work. But when the air shivered, when the workers around him blinked and then clenched their fists, he knew it had. We're awake, he whispered. We're awake. In Manhattan, James Walker had bigger problems. The suppression scrambler worked, but it had range limits, maybe 50 yards at most, and only if powered constantly. They needed more power, more coverage, and more people to operate these rigs without drawing attention. Subway Network, said Mike, laying out a revised schematic. If we place blockers along key nodes, we can create safe zones, clear zones. James nodded, like sanctuaries. Or rally points, added Lisa, the EMT, now acting as their communications lead. We can pull people in, wake them up, and send them out trained. Trained for what someone asked from the corner. James didn't answer, because he didn't want to say the word war. Meanwhile, deep in Australia's opal mining fields, massive machines, long abandoned, were rumbling back to life. Dylan Carter, once a foreman, now a leader, stood on a platform watching sparks fly from modified excavators. We're turning drills into artillery, he said, half laughing, half serious. Guess that welding certificate finally paid off. They had repurposed ore extractors into rail cannons, modified engines into EMP emitters, and scavenged military radios to connect to resistance nodes across the southern hemisphere. Dylan lit a cigarette and looked at the earth above him, knowing somehow they were no longer underground. Not really. They were beneath enemy territory. The watchers noticed something. More disappearances reported, observer Lyra, tone flat. Thousands per day, all ages, all regions. Sheltering behavior dismissed the head watcher. Primitive instincts, the mammalian response to fear. Irrelevant. But the head watcher paused when he reviewed the scan's activity in abandoned mines, defunct metros, obsolete infrastructure. Not just hiding, organizing. No weapons production detected, Lyra added. No military coordination. The head watcher dismissed it again. They are retreating into the earth, like animals. Let them. It was the third time he made that mistake. In Boulder, Professor Helen Ward had done more than just theorize. She now had a full underground lab power routed through salvaged batteries cooled by the natural rock. And she had data. Tons of it. We found something, she said in a low call to James. Some rocks, not just dense but crystalline, amplify the anti-field effects, like natural signal blockers. James raised a brow, meaning we can build portable shielding. At first small ones, personal units, but soon, he completed the sentence in his mind armies. In Toronto, a breakthrough arrived not in a lab, but in a back alley. An 11-year-old boy had stolen a watcher drone from the sky using a slingshot and a piece of rebar coated in copper. The drone malfunctioned. Locals dragged it underground. Hours later, engineers ripped it apart and realized the suppression field wasn't constant. It pulsed in cycles, meaning it could be interrupted. And if it could be interrupted, it could be disabled. The first offensive action came 29 days after the invasion. In the tunnels beneath Santiago, Chile, a small team wearing improvised blockers surfaced and attacked a watcher ground station. No bullets, no lasers. They pulled people out of the affected area into the shield and watched their eyes change. One by one, the citizens inside woke up, confused, then angry, then furious. The aliens didn't understand what was happening until it was over. The attack didn't destroy the station. It didn't have to. It shattered the illusion of control. We've confirmed it globally, said Helen during the Resistance's first true network meeting, broadcast across analog radio's shortwave beams and landline pulses. More humans wake up every hour. The field is cracking. Their arrogance is our opening. James nodded as she spoke, then added, we're not running anymore. It's time to move forward. Time to show them what humanity becomes when you back it into a corner. Across the world, from basements in Detroit to oil fields in the Sahara, voices rose for Earth, for freedom, for all who still sleep. The resistance was no longer just waking up. It was marching, turning the Earth into a fortress. 200 feet below the Rockies, inside a chamber once carved by generations of miners and now lit by a jungle of LED strips, Earth's future was being reborn. James Walker stood at the center of the war room, a former mine logistics hub, staring at maps pinned across old support beams, subterranean railways, fault lines, forgotten tunnels. Across the world, similar nodes were springing to life. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was fortification. We're not just hiding, said Tom, Reed, grizzled and gray-bearded, a mining engineer from Montana. We're building a civilization under their noses. He pointed at a wall of pinned documents. Old gold mines here, copper veins there, most of them cut through dense quartz and basalt. That blocks their field almost completely. Meaning we can expand underground, James replied. Train, build, mobilize. Tom grinned. Damn right, we'll give them a reason to fear the dark. Across the globe, old industries were rising from their graves. In South Africa, diamond drills once used to bore through bedrock were repurposed to slice open alien alloys. Welders with decades of mining experience now built the shells for EMP grenades. Mechanics stripped bulldozers and converted them into armored transports fitted with vibration dampeners to avoid detection. Alien tech's fancy, said one engineer, but nothing beats human stubbornness and a wrench. In Siberia, deep beneath frozen soil, former oil workers turned abandoned refineries into reactor fields, powering anti-field generators and shielded communication nodes. Every time a rig sparked to life, every time an ex-miner taught a kid how to operate an auger, humanity's grip on its own destiny tightened. Back in Colorado, Professor Helen Ward stood before a table covered in mineral samples. These, she said, holding up a chunk of shimmering blue rock, are our secret weapon. The mineral part, basalt part, crystal, resonated in perfect harmony with the suppression field's carrier wave. In crude terms, it messed with alien mind control. Shield tech, she said to her small team, only works if it scales. These stones give us portable solutions, wearable even. The first prototypes looked like oversized belts with crude copper coils and glowing rock slivers. Ugly, heavy, but effective. They tested them in a subway corridor near Boston. Results: full mental clarity, 30-meter range, 90 minutes runtime. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The watchers noticed the spike in underground power consumption. Humans are rerouting energy, Lyra reported, puzzled, but the grid shows no above-ground anomalies. We are tracking tremors, another observer added, consistent with tunnel construction. Mining equipment, perhaps. The head watcher considered that. More burrowing, he scoffed. They behave like vermin. They had no idea that beneath their very feet, the Earth was waking up. In Chile, where tunnels once ran copper for global trade, the first organized resistance strike was being finalized. James arrived with a 6-person team via converted mine carts, lights bouncing off damp walls as the train squealed to a stop. At the station, he was greeted by Maria Gutierrez, a former geologist turned resistance general. "Welcome to La Fortaleza," she said, waving her arm. Behind her, the old mainland had transformed into a miniature city, armories, workshops, housing pods, even a school for children born after the invasion. The air buzzed with industry and purpose. "Looks like you've been busy," James said, impressed. "Busy surviving," she replied. "Now we're preparing to win." The plan was simple. The execution was not. A watcher ground station perched on a mesa outside Santiago, lightly defended, still protected by the suppression field. But now Maria's team had field jammers. When deployed, the signal blockers would carve a clean zone, temporarily disrupting alien influence. Resistance fighters could then move in, neutralize the outpost, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. No bombs, no flashy heroics. Precision, fury, disruption. The day came like thunder wrapped in silence. At 0400 under cloud cover and guided by old seismic maps, 2 strike teams emerged through a concealed shaft just 2 clicks from the station. The jammers were activated. A deep hum rose from the earth. Inside the watcher post, alien guards suddenly twitched. One dropped its weapon. Another staggered as a motion, real, raw, human-like, flashed across its neural interface. Rage, fear, confusion. And then came the resistance. Maria's squad breached the gate's stun guns and electric net cannons, hitting their marks with terrifying efficiency. Within 4 minutes, the entire station was neutralized. They didn't destroy it. They captured it. Back underground, Helen's voice crackled over the secure analog net. "You did it," she said to James. "You actually took a watcher node intact." "We didn't want to send a message," James replied. "We wanted to steal their tools." And steal they did. Within hours, technicians from 5 different countries were dissecting the node's data systems, power cores, and communication protocols. They learned 2 critical truths. The suppression field is modular. If one node falls, the network weakens globally. The field isn't unbreakable, it's just unchallenged. The capture of the Santiago station became the turning point. Other resistance cells followed suit. Underground railways in Tokyo launched similar raids. Paris resistance slipped through catacombs beneath the Seine. New York sewer warriors detonated targeted EMPs to snatch key equipment from drone storage hubs. Every strike ended the same. Minimal losses, maximum intel, more people waking up. The watchers could no longer deny the truth. "This species is changing," Lyra said, reviewing surveillance logs. "They are adapting." The head watcher narrowed his eyes. "Then we adapt faster." But they were already too slow. Because Earth was no longer their project. It was now a fortress, one they had unknowingly helped build. And humanity was done playing defense. Human tech revolution. The alien ship lay in pieces across the hangar floor. Panels scattered, power conduits exposed like veins. Pulsing cores dimmed into silence. Robert Torres stood in the center of the underground facility, beneath the Rocky Mountains, sweat dripping from his brow despite the chill. A former aerospace engineer for experimental craft programs, he had spent his entire career dreaming of what lay beyond Earth. Now he was standing in it, touching it, and tearing it apart. "We got propulsion schematics from the Santiago node," he told his team. "Not propulsion like ours, no chemical combustion. It's a directed energy loop, a kind of gravitational lensing drive." "You mean?" "Exactly," he nodded. "They're bending space, not jumping through it. And here's the kicker, we already had the math. We just thought it was theoretical." The lab fell silent. It wasn't just that alien tech was advanced. It was that humanity had almost figured it out on its own. They just hadn't been desperate enough to finish the work. Until now. In a secondary chamber, Dr. Anna Miller sat in front of glowing waveforms that danced across 5 displays. She had spent weeks decoding the suppression field's signal layers pulled directly from the captured watcher node. "It's not one wave," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "It's a sympathetic web frequency stacked and synchronized. That's why they can control mood, thought, instinct. But also," she added, pointing to the spectrum, "that's why it's fragile. If you hit one core frequency with a cancellation pulse, the others destabilize. And that means," she said, standing up, "we can crack it. Not just locally, not just per station. We can break their hold over an entire city." Around the world, humanity pivoted. Workshops that once produced farming equipment were now assembling field disruptors. Abandoned telecom stations were hijacked for long-range counter-broadcasts. Old factories buried beneath decades of economic decay groaned back to life, now fueled by stolen alien cores, and powered by what human ingenuity did best make do. New prototypes rolled out from underground assembly lines. Portable scramblers worn like backpacks. Hybrid railguns using magnetic accelerators with alien plasma converters. Energy-dampening vests repurposed from suppression field modulators. And most ambitious, a new kind of warship. "She's not pretty," Robert said, patting the hull of the nearly finished vessel. "But she flies." The ship was a jagged mix of old stealth, bomber parts, alien alloys, and sheer madness. A Frankenstein's monster with a soul forged in desperation. They called it the Thunder. Engineers welded by hand. Technicians tested shields in hallways. Soldiers trained to fire weapons made from both Earth steel and alien plasma arrays. The Thunder would never win a beauty contest, but it was born to win something far more valuable, the first battle for Earth's skies. The Watchers noticed the anomaly. Energy signatures consistent with pre-fusion tech now emitting hybrid pulses. Observer Lyra reported, her voice brittle. "They're building ships," said the head watcher, his voice quiet for the first time in months. "That's not possible. They're centuries behind." "They were," Lyra whispered, "but not anymore." The Watchers sent patrols, drones, surveillance. But the Earth had become a nest of blind spots. Fields scrambled, readings corrupted, life signs masked by mineral interference. The humans had vanished into the dirt, and now they were crawling back out. Armed, angry, evolved. In Colorado, Anna finished her test of the city-scale cancellation wave. The prototype, a fusion of radio towers, geological amplifiers, and alien circuitry, pulsed to life in a network of tunnels beneath Denver. Within seconds, surveillance footage from the surface showed civilians blinking, stumbling. Their eyes cleared. Their hands curled into fists. And for the first time since the ships appeared, someone on the surface screamed. Not in fear, in rage. James Walker stood with Maria Gutierrez and Tom Reed in the war room, the map now littered with red pins, each marking a reclaimed area. "We have New York's lower levels, Tokyo's catacombs, London's sewers, Johannesburg's mines," Maria said. 37 urban centers fully networked, Tom added. 10 more in progress. "And the Thunder's ready," Robert said, entering the room, grease on his collar. "Not perfect, but she's battle-capable, and we have 2 more frames in production." James stepped forward and looked at them all. "This isn't just defense anymore. This is a first strike." Anna called in via secure channel. "We're ready for the synchronized broadcast," she said. "Global rollout." "We hit their suppression grid at once," she continued, "every major city. If it works," James nodded slowly. "If it works, Earth wakes up." In the orbital station, alarms began to blare. "Unusual energy activity," Lyra shouted. "Multiple sectors, Earth-based, originating from subsurface structures." "What kind of activity?" "Broadcast signatures, at our own frequencies." The head watcher leaned in. "Shut it down." "It's too late," she whispered. From Tokyo's tunnels to the subways of Sao Paulo, from abandoned oil rigs in Texas to mountain bunkers in Switzerland, the pulse activated. It sang through power lines, bounced through sewers, roared up elevator shafts and water mains. A resonance, a disruption, a defiance. The suppression web shattered like glass under pressure. Millions blinked. Millions gasped. And then, the whole planet roared. The Watchers had studied humanity for centuries. They had seen what war did to Earth. What they had never seen was what happens when humanity is wide awake and pissed off. Battle in the sky. The launch bay trembled. Not from malfunction, but from anticipation. Deep beneath the Nevada desert, in a facility once used for nuclear test monitoring, engineers, soldiers, and technicians stood packed along steel walkways as the Thunder came to life. Her engines growled, alien energy cores fused with human engineering. Her hull shimmered, a blend of reinforced Earth alloys and scavenged alien plating. And at her heart, running through every wire, every system, was one defining principle. This ship was built to punch gods in the mouth. Captain Jack Reynolds adjusted his harness in the command seat, fingers hovering above controls that were only half understood and barely tested. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that Earth needed someone to go up first, and he'd volunteered without blinking. "Thunder Control, this is Reynolds. Final systems check green, ignition sequence on your mark." "Confirmed," came the voice from below. "You're go for launch." In the bay's observation deck, James Walker stood with Dr. Anna Miller and Robert Torres. "Godspeed," Captain James whispered. Anna crossed her arms. Let's see if they're ready for us. From orbit, the Watchers were already on edge. The global broadcast wave had shattered compliance across half the planet. Ground stations were falling, suppression networks failing. Now came something worse. Unidentified object rising from Earth's surface, reported Lyra, her voice uncertain for the first time. Trajectory directed to orbit, velocity accelerating beyond human propulsion capacity. The head watcher narrowed his gaze. A ship. No, something in between. They ordered intercept drones to converge. They expected a balloon, a crude rocket, a desperate last gasp from a collapsing species. What they got was the thunder, and it roared. As Reynolds broke the edge of the stratosphere, stars snapped into clarity. Then came the first contact. 3 Watcher drones darted from above their polished surfaces, catching glints of sunlight. They moved with the grace of predators, sleek and silent. But the thunder was not prey. Target lock, shouted Lieutenant Kim at weapons. They're scanning us. Return the favor. Reynolds slammed the throttle. The thunder pivoted on gyroscopic stabilizers, spun 90 degrees mid-climb, and let loose her first volley. Twin barrels, earth-forged but alien-fueled, unleashed a storm of hybrid fire. The lead drone disintegrated before it could blink. The others dodged, but the thunder didn't chase. She drew them in, and then turned the sky into a graveyard. In the Watcher command post, silence fell, then chaos. That wasn't a drone, Lyra whispered. That was a battleship. Impossible, the head watcher said. They have no fleets. They do now. More ships were rising, not elegant like the Watchers, but built for one thing, violence. Earth's orbit turned red. On board the Thunder, Captain Reynolds barked orders as G-forces rocked the bridge. Execute pattern Delta. Flank them. Copy that, yelled Kim. Firing rail bursts, alien core stable. A squadron of Watcher interceptors surged in from the dark. But their weapons were tuned to fight cleanly, to control, not to deal with chaos. And humans were born of chaos. Where Watchers drifted gracefully, human ships lunged. Where alien weapons hummed, Earth's hybrids roared. Where Watchers used surgical strikes, human tactics slammed with brute, unpredictable force. A second drone exploded, ruptured by a warhead filled with old-fashioned TNT wrapped in alien plasma casing. Because sometimes you don't need to outthink your enemy. You just need to hit harder. From Earth, the world looked up for the first time in 3 months and saw hope. Not just resistance, revenge. News channels reactivated. Underground broadcasters hacked global signals. Live feeds captured flashes of fire across the sky, the unmistakable silhouette of the Thunder moving like a bullet among giants. Children in bunkers cheered. Soldiers in the Amazon prepared for mobilization. And the Watchers realized finally why humanity had never been truly understood. Inside the orbital command station, alarms screamed. Enemy vessels confirmed, shouted Lyra. Not one, dozens. They're coming up everywhere. The head watcher stared at the feed, blurred, erratic, messy. Human ships had no symmetry, no elegance. But they wouldn't die. They've adapted our systems, Lyra said. They're overriding our jammers. They're bypassing our shields. How? Lyra turned slowly. Because they didn't copy us, she said. They improved us. On the Thunder's bridge, Reynolds received his final transmission of the day. All resistance nodes report active, James said through the comms. Earth is no longer asleep. The skies are yours, Captain. Reynolds looked at the swirling debris of shattered drones and burning metal, then turned his gaze upward toward the Watcher fleet still stationed above. He cracked his knuckles. Let's go knock. The Thunder led the charge. Behind her, from hidden silos across Earth, more ships launched. Some were crude, some incomplete, but all carried weapon shields and one thing more dangerous than any technology: fury. The sky was no longer the Watcher's domain. It was a battlefield now, and humanity had come home. The stars are ours, the Watchers fled, not in chaos but in disbelief. For the first time in millennia, a species they had labeled primitive had not only resisted but struck back hard enough to force retreat. Half their orbital fleet lay in ruins above Earth. Another quarter had been captured, drifting hulks now being dissected in underground hangars from Nevada to Novosibirsk. And the rest, they ran, outward, past Luna, past Mars, toward the edge of the system. But humanity wasn't finished. Captain Jack Reynolds stood on the bridge of the Thunder, now docked at an orbital staging station built in secret near the moon. The scars of battle lined her hull. Her makeshift fusion coils groaned, but her heart, her crew burned hotter than ever. They're not regrouping, Reynolds said, staring at the holographic display. They're evacuating. Dr. Anna Miller's voice came through the encrypted channel, and they're trying to close the gates behind them. What gates? The ones they never wanted us to know about. Hidden beyond Neptune, cloaked in magnetic anomalies, and buried in spatial folds, the Watchers had constructed what they thought was an invisible escape route, a jump gate dormant but still active. Robert Torres had led the team that decrypted the coordinates from the alien wreckage. The gate's not just a portal, he explained. It's a highway and access point to every colony they control. Other star systems, other species. And they never expected us to find it, added James Walker, because they assumed we'd never get that far. They were wrong, and Earth's answer was simple: follow. Across the world, shipyards deep beneath the surface now pushed out fleets, not prototypes. Each vessel was a fusion of human madness and alien precision. The Tempest forged in Antarctic labs with repurposed satellite drives. The Banshee armed with pulse disruptors salvaged from Watcher drones. The Leviathan, a monstrous craft built in the collapsed caldera of Yellowstone, powered by geothermal cores and hatred. And at the front, of course, was Thunder, now upgraded, refitted, and carrying the first Terran jump drive ever assembled. They called the fleet Vanguard 1. Their mission was clear: push past the gate, confront the enemy on their own ground, burn down the system they built. The Watchers, regrouping in a distant sector, watched the readings with growing horror. They found the gate. They are activating it. They can't know how to, but they did. Because every alien system the Watchers had built came with patterns, with protocols. And humans had cracked them all. The Watchers' great failing wasn't arrogance. It was assuming intelligence required obedience. From every continent, people tuned into the final broadcast before the Vanguard crossed through. Captain Reynolds stood in front of the Thunder's command camera, face grim but defiant. "We were never supposed to rise," he said. "Not this fast, not this far. They came thinking they could cage a species, but all they did was teach us how to break chains." He looked directly into the feed. "We go now not just for Earth, but for every world they silenced, every mind they dulled, every future they tried to erase." The feed cut as the jump gate activated. For the first time in Earth's history, human ships left the solar system. On the other side, the stars were not silent. The Watchers had colonized dozens of systems, cold, sterile worlds, where they guided lesser species through forced uplift, where peace meant silence and order meant control. But the arrival of human vessels cracked that silence like thunder. The Thunder, Tempest, and Banshee emerged in tight formation, guns primed, shields humming. They didn't open fire immediately. They opened speakers. Anna Miller broadcast in over 200 languages, both human and alien. "We come not to conquer, but to end conquest. We come not to silence, but to break the silence. You are not alone anymore. Humanity stands with you." On distant colony worlds, enslaved species looked up at the sky and for the first time in generations, saw something the Watchers had erased from their hearts: hope. The first alien world to revolt wasn't Earth's doing. It was the result of a whisper carried on stolen frequencies, smuggled in through repurposed Watcher tech, and amplified by human repeaters. Within days, a dozen systems rebelled. The Watchers lost grip not through war, but through inspiration. Humanity didn't just fight, they ignited. On Earth, new settlements bloomed on Luna and Mars. Terraforming research accelerated. Civilian ships, still shielded and cautious, began mapping asteroid routes and exoplanet trajectories. The jump gate that had once hidden at the edge of the system now pulsed like a beacon. Not just a way out, a way forward. James Walker, standing beside Tom Reed on the red dust plains of Mars, looked up at the stars. "So this is how it starts." Tom chuckled, holding a cup of reclaimed coffee. "Nah, this is how it continues. Starts happen back in a tunnel with a janky jammer and a bad attitude." They both laughed. Then James turned serious. "You think we're ready?" Tom stared upward. "Doesn't matter, we're already going." Back on the Bridge of Thunder, Captain Reynolds watched a distant Watcher ship power down its weapons and hail them. Not to surrender, to parley. And in that moment, the galaxy finally began to understand. Humanity wasn't a fluke, wasn't a mistake. They were the future. Humanity Unbound. 1 year after the ships first appeared over Earth, the Watcher homeworld opened its skies. Not to drop fire, not to impose silence, but to receive diplomats from Earth. The flagship Thunder, now rebuilt as a diplomatic escort and retrofitted with alien comforts it once tore through in battle, hung like a blade in orbit above the Watcher's cradle world. No longer a symbol of defiance, now a reminder. What happens when you push humanity too far? Inside the Grand Council Hall, a spiraling dome of metal light and tradition, Admiral Jack Reynolds stood straight in his formal Terran Navy uniform. flanked by Dr. Anna Miller, Robert Torres, and James Walker. The very people who once fought underground were now negotiating among the stars. "We're not here for revenge," Reynolds said, voice calm but firm. "We're here to make sure this never happens again." The chamber was silent. The Watchers, once unshakable in their superiority, now looked at humans as something they never expected them to be. Their equals. The head Watcher stepped forward. He had watched Earth burn, then watched Earth rise, and now he watched it extend a hand. "Explain this." He began searching. "Miracle." Robert Torres stepped up. "It's not a miracle, it's math, it's pressure. You gave us no choice. You accelerated our evolution by centuries. You forced cooperation between enemies. You pushed scientists into battlefields. You made farmers into engineers. And you reminded us," he said, pausing, "that fire only burns hotter when you try to smother it." Screens across the chamber lit up. Images poured in from Watcher-controlled sectors. Colonies holding up Earth flags beside their own. Alien civilians protesting peacefully with human transmitters strapped to their backs. Former enforcers disabling their own suppression towers. Anna stepped forward next. "You tried to teach us order," she said, "but you never learned what we already knew. Emotion isn't weakness. It's purpose. It's how we rise. It's how we remember who we are, and it's how we know when it's time to say no." The Watchers agreed, not out of fear, but out of realization. They had never understood humanity because they had never understood freedom. Until freedom came roaring from Earth wrapped in steel sweat, rage, and hope. The Treaty of Seven Suns was signed under the light of seven systems. It outlawed all forms of neural suppression across the galaxy. It dismantled the Watcher control grid. And it elevated Earth to full galactic equal status with permanent seats in future interstellar governance. But humanity didn't just take a seat. They brought chairs for everyone still under shadow. In orbit over Europa, James Walker stood beside Tom Reed watching a massive new space station under construction. Built from parts of Watcher vessels and Terran ingenuity, it would be the first joint venture station staffed by humans, aliens, and former enemies alike. "Think we're ready to run a galaxy?" James asked. Tom smirked. "We ran Earth, didn't we?" "No," James corrected. "Earth ran itself into the dirt. But this is us getting it right." On Mars, terraforming had begun slow, steady, and full of mistakes. But red dust now held human boots. Alien scientists helped balance the atmospheric systems, while human engineers taught them how to adapt when things broke. On the Moon, the first galactic university opened its dome, housing students from 14 species. And orbiting Earth, Thunder served as a mobile peacekeeper. Not a warship, but a warning piece came from strength, but it stayed through wisdom. But the biggest change came not in ships or treaties, but in stories. Across the galaxy, aliens once taught to fear the word human, now told their children of how Earth fought back, of how a species bound to one planet shattered control through emotion, resilience, and mad science, of how their fury saved the future. In a final broadcast aired across every known world, Admiral Reynolds stood once more on the Bridge of Thunder. His hair was grayer now, his voice steadier, but his fire hadn't dimmed. "They said we were dangerous," he said. "They were right, but not because we destroy. Because when we rise, we take others with us." He paused, smiled slightly. "And when we fight, it's never just for us." The transmission ended, and millions cheered. In the dark, the galaxy had once whispered that Earth was a mistake, a fluke, an anomaly. But now they spoke of Earth as something else entirely. A spark, one that refused to die, no matter how deep it was buried, no matter how long it was silenced. And now, that spark was lighting the stars.